Swim away, I 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 swim away, 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 swim away,
salmon swim away, away, salmon swim away. In the basin, the copper basin, the salmon swim tonight. In the stream there the
Walking off the last steps of the ferry was frightening. Being more than 200 miles from home, riding in a van with people we hardly knew was frightening. What was going to happen next? Finally, after a pretty quick van ride with our Cordova learning friends, we jumped out of the van and headed to dinner. Yet, first we all decided to hit the trampoline. I'd have to say jumping my new Cordova learning friend off the trampoline knocked the fear right out of me. After a great 5 minutes of touring, we finally arrived at camp. Now that we had arrived at the camp, we had to break the bad juju and bring in the new juju. At first I thought, aren't rules bad juju enough? But in the end, everyone learned that these rules would help us bond, respect each other, and most importantly, have fun. Now that's good juju.
On the 21st of July, two groups of people from two different places came together to transect the wetland. We measured it out into 4 sections that, at first glance, seemed very different. Just as the transect was in 4 different parts, our day had distinct components too. The morning consisted of a 4.5-mile canoe ride to Pete Doll, with struggles encompassing everything from tides to currents. Splash! A wake-up after our long trip into the freezing cold river. Like the seal we saw canoeing, we slipped into the mud on a mudbank slide of epic proportions. Dinner was a classic, spaghetti, and with spaghetti always comes garlic bread. Our garlic bread experience was overshadowed with the sin of hard butter, but our meal was delicious, and we ended the day playing 10 truths or 2 truths and 1 lie. As we look at the different parts of our day with more scrutiny, just as we did with the transect, we realized that while the 10 of us started in our own groups, at the end of the day, we all came together to make a whole, just as the transect is a part of the entire Copper River Delta.
Wham! Fred and Amanda rammed us into a sandbar. We had to get out of the canoe to dislodge ourselves from the sandy bank of the Alleganic River.
But our efforts did not go as planned. When I stepped back in, the leg I put all my weight on suddenly cramped, and the next thing I knew, I was flat on my back in the water.
Instead of helping her up, I was laughing at her for much longer than I should have. After all that, it started raining. Not just raining, pouring.
By the end, because of what Fred and Amanda did, we decided that friendship gets you nothing. But looking back to earlier that day, we realized that our friendship to the dusky Canada geese meant everything to them.
We had gone out to some floating nest islands and repaired them. The purpose of the nest islands is to provide safe nesting grounds for dusky geese. If those islands hadn't been implemented and maintained, lots of geese would have been wiped out by the cold winter and predators. Time warp, back after the canoe ride, we hopped into a van bound for Kate's house. When we got there, we realized that friendship does give you something. A yummy dinner.
We zombie walked to the steps of the ferry with exhaustion. 5:30 a.m. After a long 3-hour ferry ride, we met up with an RCAC employee on the docks, who talked to us about how Valdez and surrounding areas are way more prepared for a future oil spill. Jeremy also talked about all the inspections and tests that everyone involved in cleanup has to go through. That includes everyone from the fishermen to the oil response engineers. After a group picture on the dock, we walked to the Coast Guard station and looked at the vessel traffic center. They monitor all of the large vessels that enter and exit the Valdez port. We also learned that if you enter the restricted zone around the oil terminal, you might get shot.
Then we headed over to the RCAC for a pizza lunch. After that, we loaded into one van and started up the long journey to Willow Mountain. 2 hours later, we pulled into the Willow Mountain pullout. The BLM archaeologist spoke to us about The ancient Lake Otnan had engulfed the majority of the Copper River Basin. Then we started the journey upwards. We climbed, and it was so steep that we could lose our footing in the rocks. As we approached the top, we heard the boom of thunder. We finally reached the top of the world. We took a few group pictures and planted Zimmy's tree and had a snack and then let the wind blow us back down the mountain, scaring people on the way. Then piled back into the van and concluded an amazing day by devouring nachos and crashed.
We started the day off with Matthew the Ranger. Our first stop was the Wrangell National Forest. We learned about its wildlife under the hot, sweltering sun. Did you know that the wood frog freezes to survive through the harsh Alaskan winter? After that, Miranda, the ecologist, taught us about how after many years working in the park, she had just recently found out about a new bat species. Miranda is currently researching more about them. Next, we met with Miss Otna, who talked about the fish wheel.
You could not believe how much it meant for the Otna people and their culture. Soon after we went to check out the Alyeska pipeline, Larry and Kate discussed how the pipes were made. They taught us how at any moment, if the pipe were damaged, they would be prepared to fix it. Finally, after an exhausting day, we all shared our own Exxon Valdez oil spill stories and drawings based on the experiences of people who actually went through the horrifying event. Overall, today was a success, and we had a blast learning.
Splash! Into the water our chocolate offerings to the river gods go. Then we're off, floating past Arctic terns, several majestic bald eagles, and towering bluffs with layers of gravel, sediment, and sand. The layers illustrate the ancient history of the land, the cycles of lake to river and back again. We weave through the gorgeous landscape for a few hours before pulling into our first campsite on a sandbar.
After setting up our home for the night, we have the talk of the magical porta potty we call the Pet and how it works. For dinner, we have delicious burritos. After dinner, we play in the mud, go over bear safety, and do group activities such as the human knot. Then we go to bed to rest up for the next day of rafting and salmon blitzing.
Smoke rises to the sky that the helicopter flies in. Along the bank stands Copper River Forestry, while the helicopter allows the water to fall from the bucket, slightly extinguishing the smoldering blaze. We continue to raft down the river to camp, as the helicopter goes back for more water.
Upon reaching camp, new struggles and difficulties arose. Tent setup. After our temporary homes were built as best we could, we trudged to a hidden creek to set up salmon blitz traps.
Unfortunately, the Alaskan vampire, the mosquito, attacked. With wet waders and bug bites, going back to camp seemed like a miracle. But nothing lasts forever. Our wader drying rack was destroyed many times.
The killer day was ended with waders drying, brownies, and a game of Mafia or Murder.
Today was a very exciting day, bug-wise. Josie got stung by a wasp 5 times, and Ferd got stung twice. Kate got a bug stuck so deep in her ear that she had to go to Wasilla to get it out. And yet, Kat stood on a ground hornet nest and was somehow not bit or stung. On top of all that, the fish traps were a disappointment. Only 4 fish were caught. However, the day wasn't a total disappointment. While one team was checking out the fish traps, the other was doing a vegetation transect. Once we got out of the woods and back to camp, Jack treated us to another hydrology experiment, which went really successfully. I learned that no matter how hard the day bites you, you can always learn something from it.
We woke up to a beautiful morning and packed up camp. We checked the fish traps and caught almost 20 minnows. Then we evaluated the plants next to the river by doing a plant transect. The plants were very different from the transect we did the day before. By the time we got back to camp, the captains had everything loaded in the raft, so we just had to pile in. This section of the river was the shortest, but it had the best rapids. DP absolutely soaked his boat. Everyone got at least a little wet. The bluffs along the river were so gorgeous. The takeout came way too fast, but everyone kept a good attitude and unloaded everything from the rafts into a massive pile in the grass. We paused for lunch,
then loaded up our gear one last time. Next stop, the airport to go wash the gear. There we rocked out to T-Swift songs while washing out the coolers. Plus we sang the song Brave while Zimmy and Amanda scrubbed the pet, also known as the pooper. On the way back to the Wise office, we picked up Kate from the ER. The bug still not out of her ear. We got back to the Wise office and made an eruption of gear. Everywhere. Luckily, it was contained by the time we shut down mine, all mine, mine, then hit the sack. Organized chaos ended the amazing adventure of the Copper River Stewardship Program 2015.